Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to Raw Law Unfiltered. Your host, the DUI guy. Wait a minute. No, he's not here. Who the hell is this guy? Oh, that's right. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Old Man Potter. But you can just call me Old Man Potter for short. Today we are going to be reading the next book of the Curious George series. I believe we're going to be skipping a book or two today, and we're going to come back to it on Christmas. However, today we are going to be reading Curious George Goes to the Hospital. And yeah, how about we just dive right into it? All right, where do we have here? Curious George Goes to the Hospital. Oh boy, I have not seen this stupid little monkey in a hot fire year. This is George. And George, he lived with his friend. Are you sure it was his friend, though? Because I'm absolutely certain that it's absolutely not his friend. That's his fucking kidnapper, as we all have seen throughout the months that we have been reading these books. Now, George, he lived with his friend. All right, the man with the yellow fucking hat. We still don't know what his name is. For the love of God, can we name the character? It has been 6 books. Can we not have a name for the person who has been kidnapping George from the beginning? This is absolutely unprecedented. Unprecedented, uncanny, very unfortunate, and do not like this. I do not. The man with the big yellow head, he was a good little monkey, but he was always curious. And today, George was curious about the big box on the man's desk. Apparently, the man had a box on his desk. All right, let's go check it out. What could be in it? Said George. Oh, George could not resist. Could not resist at all. He simply had to open it. Oh, see, we got the same thing going on down here. He is mighty curious now, ain't he, little monkey? Simply had to open it. It was full of funny little pieces of all sorts of shapes and sizes and all sorts of colors. George took one out. It looked like a piece of candy. I'm about to break it down for you, George. It ain't no fucking candy. Don't eat it. Please, for the love of God, don't put it in your mouth. That is not what she said. Maybe it was candy. Oh, you dumbass. You're going to put that little piece of puzzle in your mouth, ain't you, George? Maybe he could eat it. George put the piece in his mouth, and before he knew, he swallowed it. There's a joke to be made there, and I'm not going to fucking make it today. I feel bad for this little monkey. A while later, the man with the yellow hat came home. He said, "Why, George, I see you have already opened the box with the jigsaw puzzle. It was supposed to be a surprise for you. Well, let's go to work on it." Finally, the puzzle was finished. Well, almost finished. One piece was missing. Motherfucker ate it. The man looked for it everywhere, but he could not find it. "Oh, that is strange," he said. "It is a brand new puzzle." "Well, it cannot be helped. Maybe we'll find it in the morning." Let's go to bed now, George. The next morning, George did not feel too good. He had a tummy ache and did not want to eat his breakfast. I wonder fucking why. The man was worried. He went to the telephone and called Dr. Baker. I'll be over as soon as I can, said the doctor. First, Dr. Baker looked down George's throat and felt his tummy. Then he took out his stethoscope and listened. I'm not sure what's wrong, he said. You better take George to the hospital and have an x-ray taken. I'll call them and let them know that you are coming. Don't worry, George, said the man when they were driving to the hospital. You have been there before when you broke your leg, you dumb fucking monkey. Remember how nice the doctors and nurses were? George held his big rubber ball tight as he walked up the hospital steps. A nurse took them down a long hallway to a room where she gave George something to drink that looked white and tasted sweet. It is called barium, the nurse explained. It helps the doctors find out what is wrong with you, George. In the next room stood a big table, and the doctor was just putting on a heavy apron. Then he decided to drill a hole through George. Oh, wait, nope, that's not a drill. My apologies. Gave the man one just like it. George was curious. Surprise, fucking surprise. Would he get one too? No, he did not. You get on that table, George, the doctor said. I am going to take some x-ray pictures of your insides. What the hell is an x-ray machine? You know, I may look quite young, and I appreciate all your sentiments. I mean, some of you have been asking how old I am. Well, let me tell you, I am not I believe, if my count is right, I'm about 254 years old. But I don't feel a day over 183. You get on that table, George, the doctor said. I'm going to take some x-rays of your insides. That's some fucking witchcraft right there. I ain't never seen nothing like it. He pushed the button, and there was a funny noise. There! Now you may get up, and we will have the x-rays developed right away. Now, let's see here. There's something there that should not be. You got a special little bone in your tummy, said the doctor when they were looking at the x-rays. Why, that looks, I think. Oh, that must be the puzzle piece that was missing in our jigsaw puzzle yesterday, said the man in the big yellow fucking hat. Well, said the doctor. At least we now know what is wrong with the little patient. I'll tell Dr. Baker right away. George will have to stay at the hospital for a few days. They'll put a tube down his throat and get the peas out. It's only a small operation. I'll call a nurse and have her take you to the admitting office. Many people were waiting outside the office. George had to wait there too. Oh, look, Betsy, the woman next to him said to the little girl. There's Curious George. Betsy looked up for a moment, but she did not even smile. Betsy had never been to the hospital before. Oh, poor little Betsy. She was scared. Finally, It was George's turn. A pretty young nurse took him to the next room. My, how many rooms and how many nurses there were. One nurse wrote down a lot of things about George, his name and address, and what was wrong with him. Another nurse put a bracelet on around his wrist. It has your name on it, George, he said, so that everybody knows who the hell you are. Then the pretty young nurse came back. My name's Carol, she said. I'm going to take you to your room right now. We call it the children's ward and put you to bed. There will be lots of children to keep you company. And so it was. There were lots of children in the room. Some were up and round. Others were in their beds, with a doctor or a nurse looking after them. Dave was having a blood transfusion. Steve had his leg bandaged and was sitting in a go-kart. In a go-kart? The fuck is he doing in a go-kart? Why is this kid in a go-kart? These kids, what kind of hospital is this? I've been around for a couple of centuries and I've never seen shit like this. This is crazy. Betsy was in bed looking sad. George got to bed next to Betsy. George was so glad when he was in bed at last. His tummy was hurting again. Well, no shit, George. You ate fucking puzzle pieces. No wonder that your tummy is hurting. Come on, man. Get with the program. Man sat with him for a while. Now I have to leave you, George, he finally said. I'll be back first thing in the morning before they take you to the operating room. Nurse Carol will tuck you in when it's time to sleep. And then he left, and George just sat there and cried. Oh, poor George. Feels bad, man. As he had promised, the man was back early the next morning. The nurses were keeping George very busy. One nurse was taking his temperature, one was taking his blood pressure, one was giving him a pill. It was a happy pill. Nope, it was to make you sleepy, motherfucker, said George. And one was getting ready to give him a shot. A shot of what? A whiskey? Give him a shot of whiskey. Why the hell is she giving him a shot of whiskey? It's going to hurt, George. Why am I laughing? This is not funny. This is going to hurt, George, she said, but only for a moment. She took his arm and George let out a scream. Oh, man. I don't like this book. This is a kid's book. You're supposed to comfort them. What the fuck, man? She took his arm and George let out a scream. But the needle hasn't touched you yet, she said, laughing. There, now it's done. That wasn't so bad, now was it? No, it was really not. And anyway, it was over now. What do you mean over? The shot was over? Because the operation hasn't even begun yet. I don't know what the hell you're smoking. The damn writer can't even get their story straight. By the time the attendant come with the stretcher to wheel him to the operating room, George was getting mighty sleepy. That whiskey is starting to take a toll. He tried hard to stay awake. He was curious to see what would happen next. He could see a big table with bright lamps over it and doctors and nurses all around. They had caps on their heads and masks over their faces. Only the eyes were showing. One of the doctors winked at George. And patted his head. It was Dr. Baker, who had been to the house when it all had started. He looked funny with his mask on, and then George was fast asleep. When George woke up, he did not know what had happened. He did not even know where he was. And then he saw Nurse Carol. It's all done, George, he said. I got the piece out. In a day or two, you'll be running around again. The man had brought him a picture book. But George felt sick and dizzy. His throat was hurting too. He was not even curious about the new book. He closed his eyes again. We'll let him sleep, said Nurse Carol. The more he sleeps, the better it is for the damn stupid monkey. The next morning, George felt better. He even ate a dish of ice cream. Dr. Baker came to see him, and the man, of course, came too. Betsy was watching him from time to time. She seemed a little less sad, but she did not smile. Steve wheeled his go-kart over to George's bed. Tomorrow I can get up and try to walk again, he said. Boy, oh boy, I can hardly wait. I'll take you to the playroom now, George, Nurse Carol said the next morning. And in the afternoon, your friends will come and take you home. The playroom was full of children. A lady was showing Betsy how to use finger paint. George liked the finger paint. There were all sorts of things to play with, even a puppet theater. That was just the thing for George. He had 4 hands, so he could handle 4 puppets at the same time. George gave a real puppet show with a dragon and a clown and a bear and a policeman. The children laughed and shouted, and even Betsy, for the first time, smiled a little. There was a TV set in the playroom and also a record player. George was curious. If he climbed on the record player and turned the switch on, would it go round and round and round like a real merry-go-round? It did. It started slowly, and then it went faster and faster, and whoopee! George had lost his balance and was sailing through the air. Luckily, dumbass George landed on a soft cushion. He just can't help himself but get into trouble, now can he? This is absolutely embarrassing. The children cheered and Betsy smiled again. Oh, George was so funny. But then the play lady picked George up. That's enough for now, she said. You better take a nap before lunch. We have a big day ahead of us. The mayor is coming to visit the hospital today, and later on, you'll be going home, George. When George woke up, Steve was just taking his first steps. A nurse was helping him, and the children were watching. The go-kart was standing there, empty. George was curious. He looked at it, and then he climbed into it. And then he grabbed the wheels, and then while nobody was looking, he did another motherfucking dumb thing as always. He wheeled the go-kart right out of the room. George could make the go-kart go very fast. Oh, this was fun. And down the hole he went. By now, the nurse had noticed that he was gone and came running after him. George! George! She shouted. But George was too excited to listen. He wheeled around the corner and down the ramp to the floor below, where some men were busy pushing lunch carts, and a lot of doctors and nurses were showing the mayor around. Oh no, George, are you about to bump into the mayor? Uh-oh. George tried to stop, but it was too late. Wham! The go-kart landed right in the middle of everything. Lunch carts tumbled. Spinach and scrambled eggs and strawberry jam were all over the floor. People fell over each other, and George was thrown out of the go-kart and landed right in the mayor's arms. And there it is. Oh, what a mess it was. You broke all my dishes, someone cried. You ruined the go-kart, complained another. Oh, what will the mayor think of it, whispered someone else. And so it went. Suddenly, everybody looked up and listened. From above came happy laughter. And there stood Betsy, laughing, laughing, laughing. And then the children joined in. And then the mayor started laughing. And finally, everybody just laughed and laughed. What's so fucking funny? Well, I think I'm missing something here. I don't understand, but all right. Everybody, that is, except George. Betsy came running down the ramp, threw her arms around George and kissed him. Don't be sad, George, she said. The whole thing was so funny. I never laughed so much in my life. You know who Betsy reminds me of? The Joker in Dark Knight. That's a movie I've seen recently. She's an agent of chaos. She's much like the Joker. She likes the chaos. I never laughed so much in my life. I'm so glad you are in the hospital with me. Now the director of the hospital spoke. I'm sorry this happened, Mr. Mayor, he said, but I think we'll just clean up the mess and be done with it. George, he went on, you made a terrible mess. But you also made our sad little Betsy happy again. And that is more than any of us has done. And now I see that your friend has just come to take you home. So goodbye, George. Get the fuck out of my hospital. I'm tired of seeing your ass and all the ruckus that you bring with you and all the chaos. And take good care of yourself. The children crowded around the windows, waving goodbye when George and the man with the big yellow hat were finally leaving the hospital. As the car was turning into the driveway, Nurse Carol came running after them. Here's a little package with something that belongs to you, George, she called. But don't open it before you're home. We can all guess what that thing is. And George was curious. Well, what would it be? Who would not be? The moment he reached home, he ripped paper off, tore open the box, and there it was, the puzzle piece of the puzzle that had caused all the trouble. How nice of the doctor to save it for us, said the man with the yellow hat. And now we can finish the puzzle. The end. I'm sorry I didn't even have a chance to read your comments. I don't know what this contraption, this device called a computer, is capable of. I've never seen one before. And this is my first time using this fancy software y'all have called StreamYard. Quite interesting. Quite interesting. Now, there is some history about H.A. Ray that we can, or we don't have to, but we can go over since this is the end of the book. However, there is one more book that we skipped over that we're going to be doing for Christmas. Y'all don't forget. We'll be doing that on Christmas Eve, probably around 6 or 7 p.m. Eastern time. Let's see what we got here. This is quite interesting. Early life Both Hans and Margaret Ray were born in Hamburger, Germany. Hans Augusto Bach. Oh, he shortened his name. He shortened his name to Ray, make it more pronounceable for you American folk. He was born in the 19th century, 100 years after me. Margaret Elizabeth Waldstein was born on May 16, 1906. Hans received an old-style humanistic education and studied Latin, Greek, French, and English. Although art was not part of his studies, he loved to draw and did so from a very young age. A drawing of horses in the park was the hey, you know what? You want to come over here and read this? I think it would behoove us all if you came over to read this. Yeah, you think so? Come on over. Come on. Oh, thanks, old man Potter. I really appreciate it. Thanks for the reading, man. Let's see. So a drawing of horses in the park was done when he was just 8 years old. Hans, better known by his initials H.A., served in the German army during World War I and was stationed in France and Russia. So he's a war veteran. That's really cool. So old man Potter doesn't know how to work a computer. I apologize. We have a couple of new members. I want to shout you out. HP Nana, thank you for becoming a member. Then we have a couple of late additions, but I can't highlight them. It's Miss Ace and Yarg Uldaman. Also, welcome to the channel. So in the early 1920s, H.A. and Margaret met at a party at her parents' house in Hamburg. He was dating her older sister at the time, but then when he first saw Margaret, she was sliding down the banister. That's interesting. So he dumped Margaret's sister and started dating Margaret. That's actually quite badass of him, I suppose. In 1924, due to the increasing inflation in Germany, H.A. moved to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, to work as an accountant in his brother-in-law's import-export firm. Among other duties, he sold bathtubs and kitchen sinks up and down the Amazon River for 12 years, and the surname was adopted by H.A. when the Brazilians began to address him using the shortened form of his tongue twister name. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Meanwhile, Margaret was still in Germany when she received formal art training at the Bauhaus in Dessau in 1927, when Paul Klee and Wasily Kandinsky were on the faculty. She also studied at the Dusseldorf Academy of Arts from 1928 to 1929 and held one artist shows of her art in Berlin in the early 1930s. Margaret worked for a British advertising agency in Berlin, where she wrote the lyrics to the first jingle of a radio commercial for Lever Brothers, Margarine. Oh, wow. So they've been like in the advertising industry for like the longest time. And it doesn't surprise me that they defaulted to writing books later on in their life. So that's kind of cool. She also worked as a professional, photographer in Berlin and London before moving to Rio de Janeiro in 1935. Advertising art. Upon arriving in Rio, Margaret became reacquainted with H.A. Ray and persuaded him to leave his brother-in-law's firm. Together, they founded the first advertising agency in Rio de Janeiro, and they were married in August 1935. They created stories for newspapers and magazines, with Margaret's writing and his illustrations. Okay, so he's mostly the illustrator. But I wonder, well, it was a different time, so they probably used his name as the author. Kind of cool. Margaret also continued her photography. They founded steady work with Hoffman LaRoche, a pharmaceutical firm. He produced many of their direct mail advertising campaigns utilizing witty illustrations. He also drew maps and posters
illustrated cookbooks, and designed Christmas cards for corporate clients. Après la barbe, le visage en feu. It looks like his face is on fire. Is that like a razor blade, shaving cream? Aftershave lotion. Aftershave lotion. Zerine. Interesting. Early books. Margaret and H.A. took a belated honeymoon trip to Europe, and their planned 2 week stay in Paris turned into 4 years. Wow. I, I want my honeymoon to turn into 4 years one day. That's kind of interesting. During that happy time, H.A. began to write and illustrate books. Zebrology, published by Grace Hogarth at Chatto and Windus in London, 1937, is Ray's first title in English, although not a children's book. How the Flying Fish Came into Being, a wordless book, consisted of 8 illustrated panels, followed in 1938. That year also saw the publication of Les Oeufs and Les Cirques, toy books complete with paper animals to punch out and assemble. Oh, wow. An editor at Gallimard saw Ray's whimsical drawings of a giraffe in a French periodical and suggested that he make them into a children's book. Thus was born Raft et le Nain Sing, published in 1939. An English language version was also published that same year by Chateau and Windus as Raffi and the Nine Monkeys. Raffi's name was changed to Cecily G for giraffe, of course, in the subsequent American edition. French children loved the antics of one of the 9 monkeys named Fifi and begged for more stories about him. Fifi was soon renamed George and went on to fame and fortune in his own series of books. So that's how Curious George was born. Hey, Gallet sisters, how are y'all doing? How y'all doing? If you missed the story, I already had Old Man Potter read it for you all. So after we're done with this, you can go back and listen to the story as told by the old man. Hey, quiet, you, quiet. I'm trying to read here. So one of the monkeys, the original character was a giraffe. And then one of the monkeys was Fifi, which later turned into George, which later turned into Curious George, which basically turned into the whole series of the Curious George books. That's pretty cool. I never knew that. In June 1940, on a rainy morning before dawn, the Rays left Paris on bicycles just hours before the Nazis entered the city. That is terrifying. They took only warm coats and their manuscripts and artwork. Among the stories was Curious George. After selling their bicycles at the French-Spanish border, they went by train to Lisbon, on to Rio de Janeiro, and finally arrived in New York City in October 1940. You know, we take our plane flights for granted. It took them 4 months just to get to America, when sometimes all it takes for us is like 14 hours. And we have the audacity to complain about layovers. Grace Hogarth, imagine having a 4-month layover. You complain about a 4-hour layover. Imagine having a 4-month layover. Grace Hogarth, who had published their books at Chateau and Windus and was now at Houghton Mifflin, soon acquired Curious George, which was published originally in 1941. Curious George slowly became a classic throughout the world, and editions have appeared in every possible language. George was even renamed Zozo, Bingo, Nikki, Coco, and Piete, among others. I guess depending on the culture, the country. Some music books. In the early 1940s, H.A. Ray began a series of delightful music books, utilizing traditional French children's songs, Mother Goose rhymes, and Christmas carols. They are A Clair de la Lune, Humpty Dumpty, and other Mother Goose songs, We Three Kings, and Mary Had a Little Lamb, and other nursery songs. I didn't know Mary Had a Little Lamb was theirs. Is that for real? Are they the actual authors of Mary Had a Little Lamb? I didn't know that. Ray's creativity is evident in these books, in which he replaced the traditional designation of whole, half, quarter, and eighth musical notes with a symbol pertinent to the song. Books written by others. Although H.A. and Margaret Ray almost always wrote and illustrated their books together, H.A. illustrated several books for other authors that were published by Harper and Brothers during the 1940s. Ray was fortunate to work with legendary editor Ursula Nordstrom, and together they created several original books. Goodnight Moon, author Margaret Wise Brown collaborated with Ray on two books, The Polite Penguin in 1941 and Don't Frighten the Lion in 1942. Other collabs also published, all published in 1944, include Katie No Pocket by Amy Payne, Egbert and His Marvelous Adventures by Paul Gilbert, The Park Book, and The Park Book by Charlotte Zolotow. Don't Frighten the Lion was originally titled Monkey Business, but the title was changed because Ray had promised his editors at Cute Mifflin that he would not create books with other publishing firms that would directly compete with the Curious George books. Interesting. Just the fact that his name would be on it. I mean, that goes to show like how popular he was. Just having his name alone on the cover and the word monkey, not even George, not Curious George, but just an allusion to monkey. It's like, oh my God, it's him, as to not to compete. That's cool. What an honorary man. He honored the code. Um, a paper doll and clothing designed by Ray were printed inside the front cover of Don't Frighten the Lion. Elizabeth. Elizabeth? Another early H.A. Ray title edited by Ursula Nordstrom is Elizabeth, published in 1942. Ray's delightful sense of humor takes center stage. Delightful sense of humor? What delightful sense of humor? He doesn't have a sense of humor. We've read his books. He's torturous. But hey, maybe he's funny to some people. Ray's delightful sense of humor takes center stage in this book about a carnivorous plant. From the jacket flap copy comes the following description. When asked about the origin of Elizabeth, Mr. Ray, who has spent many years in Brazil, told of an evening in Rio when he was dining with friends, among them a botanist who entertained the party with strange tales about carnivorous plants. Ever since, Mr. Ray has looked with suspicion at flower arrangements on dinner tables. And as the years went by, he often tried to imagine what a carnivorous plant might develop into under proper care. His thoughts on the subject crystallized into a colorful and energetic shape of Elizabeth in the present book. Tit for tat. Is an inventive turnabout tale of what would happen if animals did unto us as we do unto them. It was a hit with children and adults alike, as evidenced by the following quotations. When a letter to the Rays from editor Ursula Nordstrom, we learn the salesmen are all in happy hysterics over tit for tat, and so is everyone who has ever seen the original dummy, the man at Publishers Weekly, for instance. A review in the December 1943 Junior Reviewers relates that a kindergarten group greeted this with screams of laughter, and you could see the enjoyable visions it started in their darling little heads, such as one comment, "Oh boy, if I could only play tit for tat with my father." He was a visionary. Toy books. At the same time that Harper and Brothers was publishing Elizabeth and Tit for Tat, Houghton Mifflin was busy with several cutout and play books created by Uncle Gus. Uncle Gus, of course, Hans Augustus Ray. That's clever. And his Christmas Manger, Uncle Gus's Circus, and Uncle Gus's Farm, all published in 1942, were instant successes. A May 3rd, 1942 piece in the New York Times Book Review comments, the elephants and monkeys and clowns of Uncle Gus's circus, the pigs and horses and cows of Uncle Gus's farm will push out of the page, all ready to stand up when folded. These ingenious books have real charm and will provide solid enjoyment and relief for both children and parents on a long train journey or when a child is ill enough to stay in bed but not too ill to be amused. It's so great. Le Zoo. Les découpages Ray. Le Zoo, another toy book created by Ray, was published in 1938 by Hachette in France. Since its design was unique, it was protected by a patent rather than a traditional copyright. Pretzel was the first book on which Margaret Ray's name appeared as author. She often provided ideas and edited the text and illustrations created by her husband, but this was the first time that she actually received credit for her creativity. In the concluding pages of the story, Pretzel finally captured the heart of Greta. They marry and have a litter of 5 puppies. The sequel, Pretzel and the Puppies, consists of a series of 2-page stories presented in a picture strip format similar to that of a comic strip. These short stories also appeared in Good Housekeeping magazine in late 1940s. A balloon replica of Pretzel was featured in a Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade. Katie No Pocket. Oh, geez. It's a kangaroo with, I'm guessing it's like a kangaroo that didn't have her own purse. And so she decided to like wear one. Yeah. Yep. What is a kangaroo to do when she has a baby but no pocket? Author Emmy Payne teamed up with H.A. Ray to illustrate and provide an exceptional solution to the problem of Katie No Pocket. Ray explained his creative process in the Junior Literary Guild's monthly magazine for its young readers, Young Wings. When I have an idea that seems to me just right for a book, I make sketches and jot down a few words and show them to the boys and girls who are my friends. So he's very familiar with the concept of listening to your audience. And he doesn't just like take an idea and run with it. He tests the idea first. Very smart of him. He's very intelligent individual. They tell me what they think and give me very useful suggestions. This showing of my book in the making to my small friends is quite a necessary test, and I'm usually so fond of my ideas that I want to put everything into the book. But that's not always smart, and he realizes that. He sets aside his ego, and takes criticism with a grain of salt. That's very, very interesting. Billy's Picture was published by Harper and Brothers in 1948 and was so popular that it was reprinted in Danish, Swedish, German, and even Japanese. Wow. Despite this worldwide acceptance, the United States sales began to sag in the late 1960s. Upon receiving a royalty statement in 1966, the Rays thought Billy's Picture must be out of print because the sum was so small. Following the adage that a picture is worth 1,000 words, H.A. wrote a letter to Ursula Nordstrom at Harper asking about the book's status. On the letter was a drawing of a tombstone reading, "Here lies Billy, 1948 to 1965, R.I.P.," with a reclining rabbit in the grass. At the Rays' insistence, Billy was resuscitated with a reprinting of the book using a different color scheme. The stars. H.A. Ray was so intensely interested in astronomy that he took a star guide along with him when he served as a German soldier in World War I. He found most guides impossible to interpret and vowed someday to create a more understandable method of constellation recognition. That he did in 1952 with the publication of The Stars, A New Way to See Them, the work of which was triggered by the design of the Rays' 1947 New Year's card, which featured a constellation motif. H.A. spent more than 4 years creating the stars, an immediate bestseller. It has since become the definitive star watching guide, popular with laymen and professionals alike, and is still in print. Many adults who know nothing of Curious George are very familiar with H.A. Ray's name because of the stars. He later published a children's version entitled Find the Constellations. Looks like that's the sky, our night sky. Curious George sequels. So after the publication of Curious George in 1941, fans had to wait another 6 years before more adventures of the mischievous monkey appeared in Curious George Takes a Job. The Rays often made cameo appearances in their books. In the second title of the series, on page 13, one can find Margaret with her dog and H.A. with a friend promenading on Fifth Avenue. The third title, Curious George Rides a Bike, was published in 1952. In this series of misadventures, George sets off on his new bicycle to deliver newspapers, builds a whole navy of paper boats, lands in a traveling circus, gets an ostrich into trouble, and rescues a runaway bear. We read all of these, by the way. In the fourth title, Curious George Gets a Medal, published in 1957, and you can find them in the playlist section of the channel. Don't forget, by the way, to like this video, comment below, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Excuse me. So in 1957, George goes up in a spaceship and receives a medal for his bravery. 2 years later, the United States launched a squirrel monkey named Gordo. Gordo means fat in Spanish. Into space aboard Jupiter AM-13. Gordo was followed in 1959 by Abel and Baker, who rode in a nose cone to an altitude of 300 miles and a distance of 1,500 miles. It seemed clear to Margaret that their fictional story had inspired the actual events. Since it was issued as a part of a beginning reader series, Curious George Flies a Kite was written with a restricted vocabulary of only 219 words. Ah, I see. According to author Margaret Ray, it was a fad then, and many educators thought first graders could learn to read quicker that way. Like so many things, it proved to be nonsense and was given up after a while. Luckily, children never noticed that this book was written differently from the other Curious George books. I haven't noticed. I can tell you that for a fact. Margaret recalled some difficulty in preparing the British edition of Curious George Learns the Alphabet. You might think that the British use the same alphabet as we do. Far from it. Several pictures had to be changed. No Xmas there. No mailman. It's postman. No quarterback. No truck. It is lorry in England, and so on. So we had to find substitutes. That's actually kind of crazy. Ay, pinche gordo. Why does it look like the turtle has a cross on his back? That's very religious. You see that? It legit looks like a cross. The final Curious George book written during H.A. Ray's lifetime is Curious George Goes to the Hospital. The storyline was suggested to the couple by administrators of Children's Hospital in Boston. They wanted a book to prepare children for their first visit to a hospital. The Rays derived a great deal of satisfaction from this book, since many mothers wrote to tell them how effective it was in reducing their child's trauma. That's cool. White Black the Penguin, never published in the Ray's lifetime, has vibrant, full-color illustrations and is complete with beautifully hand-lettered text. According to the correspondence in the archive, it was submitted for publication to Ursula Nordstrom of Harper and Brothers in a letter dated October 27, 1942. Nordstrom commented, "I think Whiteback can be shortened, sharpened, and improved. I hope you will let me see it again. There is no written evidence that the manuscript was resubmitted. It remained in the Ray's possession and was transferred to the Grummond Children's Literature Collection at the University of Southern Mississippi, where the entire Ray archive is housed. There, in the fall of 1999, Anita Silvey, publisher of children's books at Houghton Mifflin, discovered the manuscript and was finally published in 2000. White Black, the Penguin Sees the World." Interesting. The renaming, Sees the World, because it's been like 60 years since it was written. New Year's cards. The Rays had a tradition of designing and producing an original card each year to mail to family and friends. They used the card to inform people of a new address, to comment on the world's political situation, or to showcase an imaginative idea. Lucky Stars for 1941. It's like a turtle eating a lucky clover, and that's red, white, and blue with a world on the turtle's back. I'm not sure what that's supposed to signify. Leave it to their imagination. I don't know. Waterville Valley. Although very much at home in their Greenwich Village apartment, the Rays wanted to spend summers in the country where Margaret could garden and H.A. could have a clear view of the heavens, since he was a star lover. On May 14th, 1958, construction began on the Curious George Cottage in Waterville Valley, New Hampshire. Here, they spent relaxing summers and drew inspiration from their bucolic existence there. Bucolic? Relating to the pleasant aspects of the countryside and country life. I've never heard that word before. Um, H.A. was well known for rescuing injured animals and nursing them back to health. Coffee, an orphan chipmunk whom H.A. had hand fed with an eyedropper and returned to the wild, came back each summer to visit the human friends. Oh, that's so cute. Another benefactor of H.A.'s tender care was George the squirrel, whose watercolor image drawn by Ray is shown below. They had a talent, writing and drawing. Other artwork by Margaret. Margaret had many interests and accomplishments. She was fluent in 4 languages, and in addition to writing and editing, she spent her early adult years as a journalist and photographer. When she and H.A. were first married, she put her considerable skills to work, supplying newspapers and magazines with photographs. Another outlet for Margaret's creativity was pottery. She trained at the Haystack Mountain School of Crafts in Deer Isle, Maine, in the late 1960s and early 70s. She designed and created decorative pieces as well as functional teapots, bowls, plates, and cups. Among the decorative items are 2 versions of Jonah and the Whale, Aztec inspired women carrying baskets, a mother elephant and her baby, a pair of dragon candle holders, and 2 whimsical figures that represent Margaret and her husband. Needlepoint was yet another creative outlet for Margaret. Man, is this anything that this woman can't do? She designed, charted, and stitched a number of complex images over the years. Among her needlepoint works are a portrait of H.A. with Curious George in the background, an unfinished self portrait, a footstool depicting Scoopy. The Rays always had a Cocker Spaniel, and Scoopy was their 3rd dog. A portrait of Andy, Spaniel number 4, Jonah and the Whale, and a picture of the Washington Square apartment where they lived from 1941 to 1949. Aw, that's cute. I like it. That's amazing. I wonder how long it took her to do that. Stuffed Georges. The first stuffed Curious George was produced by Commonwealth Toys in 1971. Margaret and H.A. took great pains to ensure that the stuffed toys were accurate representations with eyes and nose correctly spaced and sized and with the correct colors used in the fur. Various Curious Georges range in height from 6 inches to 6 feet. Wow. A Jogging George was introduced by Knickerbocker Toys in 1982 and came complete with a hooded sweatshirt. That's a very accurate representation of George, for sure. Merchandising. In addition to the stuffed version of Curious George, there are hundreds of products bearing his image: photo albums, lunchboxes, sweatshirts, and washcloths. There are Viewmaster reels, rolls of stickers, wooden puzzles, magic slates, color forms, tennis shoes, and China music box, and a Curious George board game. Personal greetings. H.A. was also well known for creating personalized greetings for his wife and other relatives and friends. Included in the archive are several original birthday cards given to Margaret. The Rays were rarely apart, but when Margaret attended pottery classes in Maine for several weeks each summer from 1969 to 1972, H.A. remained in Waterville Valley. He sent heavily illustrated letters to Margaret almost every day. Wow. Talk about love. Huh? Talk about how much he loved his wife. When she was at pottery class in Maine, when they were vacationing in New Hampshire in the summer, and she would be in Maine studying pottery, he would send her heavily illustrated letters almost every day. Keeping her in touch with his activities. Wow. The following group of photographs provides a visual history of the personal and professional lives of them, and there are many other photographs, part of the archive housed at the University of Southern Mississippi. H.A. Ray proudly displays the cover of Whiteback the Penguin, Sees the World. Oh, so that was the full title. Okay. Late 1930s. Below, Margaret and Ray relaxing in Rio de Janeiro before they moved to New York. Passports. Brazilian passports. They both look very intelligent. H.A. Ray looking out over the New York City landscape from their apartment window. Photo probably taken by Margaret. H.A. Ray with his Cocker Spaniel Charky, 1944. And there's Margaret with Charky. They look so happy together. Look at those two. Posed for the camera in the 40s. And that's them in 1951. (1954), Waterville Valley. You can see H.A. Ray drawing Curious George. Margaret Ray and a Cocker Spaniel, Jamie, around 1956. 1958, they work on Curious George Flies a Kite with Charles Rolt of Riverside Press at Houghton Mifflin. I wonder if Houghton Mifflin was an inspiration for Dunder Mifflin at The Office. I can't help but wonder that. Ambidextrous H.A. with Margaret on the book tour for Spotty. Oh, he was drawing this with literally both hands at the same time? Please, I wish there was a video. That would be so cool to watch. Working in his studio in the early 1960s. And the Rays promoting Curious George goes to the hospital in 1966. So this is the last book. So we read the last book, but there's still one book to go. Like I said, we're going to be doing Curious George Learns the Alphabet on Saturday, the day after tomorrow. H.A. Ray reading to kids in the 1970s. Aw, H.A. Ray with a friend. A monkey. Margaret Ray surrounded by Curious George replicas on the occasion of her 90th birthday. Damn, she looks good for 90. 1996. H.A. Ray, the astronomer. And these are some more illustrations. I think that's it. I think this is it. Yep. That's it. Yeah, that's it for today. Thank you all for joining me. This was definitely a lot of fun. You want to say bye? 1 second.
Well, thank you all very much for coming. We had a grand old time reading the book together. And I'll see you all, or maybe I won't. Maybe it'll be somebody else on Saturday, somewhere in the evening time, I would imagine, I reckon. So I'll see you there. I will probably see you all tomorrow, or at least Larry will, the DUI guy. And until then, folks, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and a Merry Merry Christmas. Bye, everybody.